All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. So, I am your host for the webinar today. I am attorney Joshua Sells. I am the senior tax attorney here at JM Sells Law, ohiotaxattorney.com. And today on Ohio Tax Attorney Tax Talk, we are going to talk about the six ways, the six methods, if you will, of getting out from under an IRS tax debt. So if you owe the IRS money, if they have put you into collections, there really are only six ways to get out of it. And we're going to discuss those six ways today. And we're going to take a look at each one of those, and maybe one of them is something that you want to explore. And so we encourage you, if you owe the IRS money, if you are in a position where you are in collections, get a hold of one of our tax attorneys. You can reach us at ohiotaxattorney.com, and we would be more than happy to take a look at that for you. We do offer free phone consultations. We do a free case analysis for all of our clients. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. It looks like we have about 38 people joining the webinar today. Again, this is recorded live, but we are going to put the recording out there. So when you are watching this, it may not actually be the live version of it, but we definitely wanted to get this out there as a resource because a lot of folks dealing with the IRS don't really know what options are out there. So that's what we're going to do today. So for those of you on the live broadcast, if you have questions during the broadcast, please go ahead, put them in the chat box to the side of the webinar, and one of our associates will answer those. Again, we'll go ahead and get right into this. So first thing I want to say is this webinar, the material we're going to cover today, it assumes that the tax debt is perfectly valid. There's no question as to the liability. So the IRS has done an assessment, and you owe that money and the penalties and interest. So there's really no question about the liability of it. That's a different topic for another day. So if you owe the IRS money, if they have came after you in collections, there are six options. Number one, the first option, this may seem very simple because it is, pay it. If you owe the IRS money, paying the debt, that's a sure way of ending collections. And if you have that option, if that option is available to you, that's one of the quickest ways to close your case and get the IRS off your back. So we've worked with clients before who have came to us, have owed a couple $1,000s, and they wanted just to pay it, but they had us look at penalty abatement. That even if you pay it in full, there's still an opportunity to get your penalties removed. So that's something that, of course, we do here quite frequently. So paying the tax debt, that is a sure way of getting that resolved. Now, if that's what you're going to do, if you're going to pay the tax debt, the IRS says, Mr. Smith, you owe $5,000 and you don't want to deal with any of the other options. You just want to be done with it. I get that. I understand that. Then one of the things you need to make sure about is that you get a complete payoff letter from the IRS. Call the number on the latest notice you receive from the IRS, and they will be able to give you a payoff. What tends to happen, clients will pay the last notice amount that they received, and the interest and penalties are still accruing. So it's important that you get a precise payoff if you are going to pursue that method. So you're probably not here because you're interested in hearing about paying it off. So let's go on to the second option. The second option, do nothing. You can choose to ignore it. I don't recommend that. The longer you ignore that tax debt, the worse it's going to get. The penalties and interest quickly exceed the original tax debt. A lot of times our clients come to us, they owe $20,000, $30,000 in tax, and another $40,000, $50,000 in penalties and interest. That's not that uncommon. The IRS is very aggressive with penalties and interest, and there are ways you can mitigate that, but the longer you put that off, the harder it is to resolve it, and typically the worse off you are. So deal with it sooner than later. Don't just ignore it. It is true that the IRS has 10 years to collect. That's the statute of limitations. And then after that 10 years, the tax debt does fall off. But now, keep in mind, though, every time a penalty is assessed, that penalty has its own 10 years of statute of limitations. So your tax debt may be here, and it's got 10 years to go, but then your penalty is here, and it has its own 10 years. So the sooner you can take care of your tax debt, the better. And we work with a lot of clients who are close to that 10-year statute of limitations. And if you're close to that, if you've already put this off for all those years and you're close to the 10-year statute of limitations, one of our attorneys would be able to look at that for you and come up with a good resolution, because there are things that you could do that may stop the statute of limitations from running. You don't want that to happen. We get a lot of clients who went with some of these, I'll call them fly-by-night tax resolution firms, and they were months away from having the tax debt fall off, and they basically stopped the clock because they pursued different appeals or what have you. And so every case is unique. That's why you need an experienced tax attorney to evaluate your case. So again, option 2, do nothing, not recommended. It typically makes it worse. Option 3, so this is probably the option that you have all heard about, the Offer and Compromise program. The IRS Fresh Start Initiative really promoted this, and a lot of the tax resolution firms really pushed this. You probably know this as pay pennies on the dollar, and that is true to a certain extent. However, I think it's less than 3% of all taxpayers who owe the IRS qualify for an offer and compromise. They're very hard to qualify for, and there is a lot of paperwork. But what is an offer and compromise? So we're talking about the offer and compromise doubt as to collectability. That means you probably, in the eyes of the IRS, are not going to pay the full tax debt because you have limited financial means per the IRS financial standards. And so the IRS will accept, in certain situations, a settlement. That settlement could be a lump sum where you say, hey, IRS, I owe $50,000. I'm never going to pay this off. I'd be willing to offer you $3,000 lump sum. Here's my payment. Cancel the rest of it. And if the IRS accepts that, voila, you pay your settlement and the tax debt is gone. The liens are released, the levies stop, all is well. The other option under the offer and compromise is a payment, basically over 24 months. You say, hey, IRS, I can pay you $5,000 on my $50,000 tax debt. I'll pay it monthly for 24 months. And again, the IRS may accept that. It is so important that you don't just submit that on your own, because that stops the statute of limitations. I remember that clock we were talking about, 10 years until your tax debt falls off. Well, if you file an offer and compromise, it stops that clock from running. So if you make a mistake, you're going to have to redo it, and that clock stops running. So talk to one of our tax attorneys. We explore that option with every client to see if they qualify for an offer and compromise. It is a wonderful program. It takes a lot of paperwork to qualify for, a lot of analysis. And there are things you can do. A lot of the fly-by-night tax resolution firms won't tell you this, but there are things you can do to prepare your finances to better qualify for it. And so we know a lot of the tips and tricks of the trade to really get you into that program, get you qualified for that program. Where are we? Number four. The fourth option is currently not collectible. So if you are in a financial status where you basically have more expenses in your monthly budget than you do income, the IRS will put you in a currently not collectible status. This means all the collections stop. They won't levy your bank account. They won't send you harassing letters. They won't call you. You are put into that status. They're supposed to review it annually to see if your financial situation has changed. But we all know that the IRS is under the gun financially, if you will. They don't have a lot of extra resources right now. So most of my clients that get put into a currently not collectible status, they stay there. And why is that a good thing? Because 10 years and that debt falls off. So most of our clients come to us, their tax debt is 2, 3, 4 years old. They qualify for currently not collectible. They get into that status, they ride out the clock, and the tax debt is gone. So that is a wonderful program to have, especially if you know for sure that your income isn't really going to go up a lot in the future. The IRS does allow for some fluctuation of your income. The fifth program, I think we're on number 5, is the partial payment plan. So a partial payment plan, you can make a payment to the IRS, but it will never cover the full debt. So the IRS allows you to make a partial payment. And again, why we're talking about this is because you didn't qualify for the offer in compromise. Maybe you had too many assets, your income was too high, whatever it is. You didn't qualify for currently not collectible, again, because that monthly income was higher than your expenses. And so the IRS says you need to make a payment. We'll stop the collections efforts. We'll stop the harassing emails, phone calls, and all that stuff. But you have to make a payment. The IRS says you'll never pay it all in full. So we'll accept a partial payment for the next X number of years, and then the tax debt will fall off. The final option, the sixth option, this is one of the most popular ones. You owe the IRS, say $10,000. The IRS says, wonderful, you have 2 years, pay it off, make a monthly payment, whatever that payment is. And then most of our clients who end up on a full payment plan, we get them on the payment plan, but then we go back and we get all the penalties abated, whether it's a first-time abatement or maybe there's reasonable cause. A lot of our clients have gotten sick or ill over the years, so they had some kind of medical issue. And so we can make an argument to the IRS that this is not the client's typical behavior. They're a good taxpayer. And so the IRS will remove those penalties. And then you get onto that payment plan and we get the penalties removed. And then that takes care of your tax debt. And at the conclusion of that payment plan, we get the liens removed if they had been filed. So those are really the 6 options that you have if you owe the IRS. Number 1, pay it. Number 2, do nothing. Don't recommend that one. That's a bad idea. Number 3, the offer and compromise, which is their settlement program. Number 4, currently not collectible, which is, again, you just get parked in that status and they leave you alone. 5, a partial payment plan. Or 6, a full payment plan where you will eventually pay the full debt over time. So those are the options. Those are your options that you have in a nutshell. Now, I will say, each one of those comes with its own nuances. There are a lot of different nuances and details that come along with every single option that the IRS has. An experienced tax attorney can look at your case and can help you get a better option. I'll give you an example. I had a client, this was just a few months ago. They came in, we did a full financial analysis on the client. When our clients come to us, we do a tax debt liability analysis. We look at the tax debt, we look at the interest, the penalties, find out exactly what the IRS says they owe and make sure that is legitimate. And then we do a full financial analysis. We evaluate the client's finances to find out what is the best foot forward, what's the best option for them. And our client, we'll call him Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, based upon his income and his expenses allowed by the IRS, the IRS has national financial standards that you can't exceed. So based on those, his income and his expenses, the IRS said, Mr. Smith, you can afford a $200 a month payment. Mr. Smith told me, no, I can't. And I agreed with Mr. Smith. And so we looked at his finances and found out that Mr. Smith was driving a junker. His car had no loan to it. It was a 1990 something, I think a Chevy, I don't know, it was some kind of old Chevy. And he had no payment, but it was a rust bucket. It was falling apart. And he was actually putting a lot of money into expenses just to maintain that car. And because he didn't have a car payment, he didn't get to include the car payment on the expense side the IRS allows. You see, the IRS allows a certain amount of car payment, but you don't just get it, you actually have to have a car payment to qualify. So we had Mr. Smith go and get a newer vehicle, and he had to get a loan for it. It was a decent interest rate. It wasn't the best because of his credit, but he got a loan payment. Long story short, his loan payment was about $250. And he got rid of his car, his old junker, if you will, and also all the car repair expenses that came with that. And because he added $250 to his expense side, now the IRS said, well, your expenses are higher than your income, currently not collectible. And so Mr. Smith got to go into the currently not collectible status. The IRS left him alone, and the money that would have been going to his tax debt was actually going to his own car through a car loan. So he ended up not paying the IRS. He did not have to pay them. He was currently not collectible. So he last I checked, he only had, I think, 2 years left on the statute of limitations. That is going to fall off. He'll never have to pay the IRS on that tax debt. And because we looked at his financials, we were able to get him into a newer vehicle. It was a win-win for that client. So it's important to look at your financials and do the complete financial analysis. So with that being said, we're going to open it up to some questions if anybody has any, and we'll be answering those along the web chat here, or the webinar chat feature. Before we start, though, if you do have any questions, if you owe the IRS, give our firm a call. We believe in free consultations. We don't charge you to ask us a question on the phone. Give us a call, schedule an appointment with one of our tax attorneys. It is completely free, no obligation. Call 1-877-517-0307. Again, that phone number is 1-877-517-0307. Check us out on the web, ohiotaxattorney.com. And we are JM Sells Law. That is all we do is tax law. And so we are the experts when it comes to tax law. We would love to be able to help you. And we'll go ahead and open up the chat feature, and you can stay on and ask any questions that you may have. Those will show up here, of course, for the recorded audience. And again, my name is Attorney Joshua Sells, Senior Tax Attorney here at JM Sells Law. I hope this was helpful. Again, the entire point of this was to equip you with some knowledge about what options are out there. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There are plenty of options, but you got to deal with it. You got to face the music, if you will. Give us a call. Let us help you. Once a tax attorney is representing you, the IRS does not talk to you. They have to talk to us. So we serve as a buffer between you and the IRS. They cannot harass you anymore. They have to go through us. So you can rest easier knowing that there is an attorney standing between you and the IRS. You may be asking, why hire an attorney? One of the big reasons is an attorney can actually take the IRS to court. We are able to take the IRS to tax court or district court if they don't treat you fairly. And the IRS knows that we can do that. And so they come to the table ready to play. So I hope this was helpful. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to answer those for you. Thank you, and have a good day.